TV. What was that? You better get a fresh dip and buckle up.
Happy New Year's, Larry Porch.
Happy New Year to you, Mark.
And Happy New Year's to all of our faithful followers watching this broadcast. We are coming to you, not live, but if you're
In
watching...
Memorex.
But we hope that you are watching this live, because Larry and I are in the chat room right now, ready to take any questions that you might have. And I tell you, it's really good to be able to not have to focus on the show and be able to enjoy the chat room. So
That's true. It's hard to keep up with porch possums and salt lamp lickers if you're sitting here doing a show, you know?
yeah, it sure is. I'm going to tell you, I'm really excited about this pre-recorded broadcast, because what we get to do tonight is Larry and I have picked out some of our favorite encounter stories that we have heard some of our guests tell. And we want to remind you that it is pinned at the top of the comment section if you want to hear the entire podcast. Our first guest tonight is David Pearson and what happened to him. And if you know who David is, then you know on YouTube he is Really Big Monkey. And he's been a mentor of mine for many, many, many years. When Larry and I go out into the woods, you have to be prepared. David probably would not consider himself a bushcrafter, but he really is. But his channel is so good with showing techniques with camping, how to modify and make your own things. And so I don't know how many different things that we have tried, Larry, of his.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he'll do a video on making coffee. He'll go out and bake a cake. It's always something, a different shelter. It's just, and that's what he mainly does. He focuses on camping and outdoor activities that have to do with camping, hiking, making tarp shelters, cooking on an open flame, whatever, showing you how to make the fire out of different ways. Yeah. He does all that. He's not a Bigfoot researcher. Bigfoot's not even on his radar, honestly. But he came on our show and he shared one of his weirdest encounters he had while he was out camping in the woods, and it is a weird encounter.
That's what to me is so good, that he is not in the Bigfoot community, but he is open-minded enough to know that what happened to him was out of the norm and something that he has never experienced before, and it spooked him. For me, this is a great witness to talk to and to find out what happened, his take on it.
Right.
And I remember about 5 years ago, Larry and I was doing some primitive camping. We were trying to build shelters like what Really Big Monkey does. And Larry made his little tarp shelter. I snuck a one-man tent in there, and it's kind of like a coffin tent. It's something that you have to crawl in. It's not but about 2.5 feet tall at the tallest point. After I put it together, I threw a tarp over it to make it just look like a little tarp tent. And guess who busted me out on my tent?
It was David Pearson. Yeah, I was suffering laying on the ground under a tarp. And I'm pretty sure it was January whenever we did that. I think my quote was the next morning, you said, "How'd you sleep?" And I said, "Fine, except for the coyote that run through chasing the coon," or something like that.
But we have gotten a lot of good tips. We have tried so many different things. So if y'all enjoy camping, then check out his channel, Really Big Monkey. I believe the channel is called Fun in the Woods.
That's right.
It is a great channel. He is a great guy. I think his channel's been on the air almost a dozen years. So he's just not a fly-by guy night. If you watch his whole podcast, you can really enjoy what he brings to the table as far as going out and enjoying the outdoors. So I think, Larry, we ought to just go ahead and play the clip. What happened today? Oh, and I should say Dave, he lives in Georgia. So this is where this took place, was in Georgia. So enjoy.
Yeah. Now, the scariest thing that ever happened was I actually told the story in a video once. And that was, there's a huge area not far from where I live called Johns Mountain. And it's not just a mountain, it's a range of mountains. And so there's an area that I went on, and this is when I was young. I was still living with my mom. And I told her, I said, "I'm going camping again." You know, every time I left, I'd come home from work, get my stuff, and leave. Say, "I'm going camping for the weekend." And so I went, and I hiked up there in the middle of nowhere. And this, you know how you have the feeling you're being watched?
Yeah.
Okay. I've had that feeling before, and it's something that you know exactly the feeling, and it makes a hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's not a good thing. And the whole night, I had a funny feeling that I was being watched, and I was just real uneasy all night. And so I set up a tarp shelter. I put one of those green Army GI pads in there, and I had my backpack. I had an Alice pack. I had it in there, and I unpacked some things and put it in there. And I had ate before I went. I just had some snacks. I wasn't really going to cook any food or anything. I was going to eat the next day and leave. And so I went to lay down, and it was a pretty bright, it wasn't a full moon, I don't think, but it was a pretty bright night. The wind was kind of blowing just a little bit, but I heard a rustle off in the distance, and I thought, "What's that?" And I was already very nervous, because in my own mind, there was things going on in my mind, like I'm very uneasy. I feel like I'm being watched. And so I heard something off in the distance, and as I could hear it through my tarp, it was circling me. It made me very nervous. And so I came out of the tarp and stood up and looked around, and I could hear it. It was in a huge circle around me. I ducked back in and put my boots on real quick, put my jacket on, and I stood there for a minute, and then it circled around me, and then I heard it stop. And then all of a sudden, something went up a tree, and as it went up the tree, and I was looking right at it, I couldn't see anything, but I could see bark flying off and branches breaking. And when I got to the top, I could see that the pine needles of that tree moving around. I reached in and I grabbed my Alice pack, and then it started moving across me directly overhead, and there was just movement, and this movement was the size of a Volkswagen Bug.
Wow.
Yeah, but I couldn't see anything but the trees moving. And like I said, there was kind of a light breeze that night. It wasn't like it was, and it was directional. It was directly overhead, and then it hit that other tree, and then something shot down that tree, bark flying everywhere, branches. That was it. I grabbed that Alice, threw it on. I left my tarp. I think I left my canteen behind. I left a aluminum pot behind. I left a bunch of stuff behind. And I literally ran. And thankfully, the moon was bright enough that I could see, because sometimes in that area, it's so dark when the moon is not out, you can't see nothing.
Right.
And so I ran down, and then I was so exhausted, I finally got to where I had to slow down and start walking. And I didn't hear nothing behind me, but I had an uneasy feeling. And so I wandered for a while there, and then I finally found the trail, and I walked out on the left, and I have never been to that area to this day.
Wow.
And I'm not going back.
Well, you could show me and Larry that little area.
I'll email you the coordinates.
Okay.
But I'm not going back. I'm absolutely not going back. I have too uneasy of a feeling about it. I feel better since I put that on YouTube, and you know, I used to think to myself, I thought, well, if I put it on YouTube and describe the story, somebody will know what it was. But I'd be dang if I didn't get about 10 or 15 different suggestions that very easily could make sense.
Right.
So there were so many suggestions, I don't know what it was. And this is going to really sound stupid, and this is really probably, a lot of people made fun of me, but the best way to describe what it was in the movie Predator, how you could see just a weird, clear-looking shape moving through the trees.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like.
Huh.
So I don't know what it was.
Sounds like a cloaking Bigfoot.
I don't know. Like I said, I love the Bigfoot TV shows. I've read the books. I've studied about it. I've heard stories. But I personally have never hunted for Bigfoot or seeked out Bigfoot. So I don't know that much about the true behavior of them. I know people that study them do know the behavior of them. And I went to the Bigfoot Museum in Cherry Log, Georgia.
Yes, I've been there. Yeah.
So have I.
When I went there, I thought, well, this will be a weekend trip. When I went there, I was like, it's probably some cheesy roadside attraction. But I went, and I could not believe the research and the evidence and the quality of that place. And it was amazing. So, I'm glad there's people that research it, because I don't have time to do any of that. I don't have time to do any of the research or the hunting or the seeking out, because, it probably takes a lifetime to actually see one. And I'm sure you got to be in the right area.
Yeah, a lot of it's just blind luck,
Yeah, you have to stumble upon one.
I'll let you in on a secret, Dave.
What's that?
What you're doing is very much what we do most of the time, except we take thermal cameras and that type of stuff with us where you generally go. They're there.
Well, the difference is between, I don't know how y'all camp, but I don't stealth camp hardly ever. I mean, I'm out there, burping and eating chili and getting gassy and, out there singing and swinging an axe and, making noise and doing all kinds of things. I'm not stealthy at all. The only time I'm ever stealthy is when I'm trespassing. Oh. Did I say that?
No, you didn't say it. Man, I don't know about you, but if I saw something like that, I'd have done just what Dave did. I'd have left my stuff in the woods and been gone also. The thing about this is, he never calls it a Bigfoot, and we don't know what it was, but that predator-looking deal coming through the trees at you, that would freak me out. I guarantee it.
I tell you, it's when things happen in the woods and people that don't do primitive camping, it's really hard to explain what it's like when it's pitch black out there and you can't see anything around you and you've got some type of weird activity going on, and you have to harness your emotions when something like that is happening, because it is too easy to allow your anxiety to get the best of you.
Right. I know Dave goes out in the woods by himself a lot, camping by himself. And to my knowledge, this is the one time that he just cut and run. And he had never done that before. And I mean, when you're going out in the North Georgia mountains camping like he does, all by himself, now occasionally his son goes with him, but he hasn't told us any story like that except that one thing. And he'll tell you he has not been back to that mountain since that.
And I don't look for him to.
I don't either.
Well, our next encounter story is from Khym Christensen that we had on our podcast. And Khym lives in South Oregon near the coast. Khym is someone that I would describe or not describe as a sidewalk spitter. This is a lady that has grown up in this forest all of her life and has been an outdoors person, knows all the animals that are there. For her, this first story that she is going to tell is a story that she had heard from her uncle when she was a little girl. It's kind of funny that your people that you respect, that whenever you know how they are and you know that when they go to tell something, that it's coming from their heart. It was something that really affected her uncle.
And her uncle wasn't a sidewalk spitter for sure. He was a career logger, had been out in the woods for his whole life doing logging. So he was a tough man, and there wasn't much he backed down from.
So let's go ahead and listen to Khym tell this encounter story that with what happened to her uncle.
And my uncle Hans, he was a woodsman. He cut lumber for a living and spent most of his life out in the forest. He started telling the family what happened to him. And he told us he was on a lumber run to Marshfield, which is up the coast about 24 miles. And the roads back then weren't paved. They were gravel roads and long, twisty, windy roads. He actually had to get on a ferry to cross the river to take the lumber up to Marshfield to sell it. So he told us he got done late that day, and when he was heading back, he was coming through this area called Seven Devils, which is old growth forest, really dark, shadowy, with lots of twisty turns in the road. Yeah. And I've been through there before they logged it, and it was very beautiful, but it was kind of creepy, especially at night, with all the big trees and stuff. And he said this monster, just like that was on TV, stepped out in front of his truck, and he hit his brakes, and it stopped in front of him, and it turned towards him. And he said it was taller than the cab of the truck. and it was looking at him straight in his face, and he could see its head, chest, and down to its waist, almost, in front of this 2-ton truck.
Yeah.
And he said it leaned forward and just let out the most god-awful scream in his face that he's never heard anything like it in his entire life. It scared him to death. He actually backed that 2-ton truck up out of this road about 7 miles to turn around on this twisty, it's a 1-lane old-fashioned wagon train road, so mule train road basically, to turn around to go back to Marshfield to stay overnight, because there was no way he was coming back to Bandon that night.
Yeah.
And my uncle, he was a very serious man. These folks that I was raised with, they made a living off the land, so they were very serious people. He wasn't known to tell a tall tale or, make things up, basically. So I had no reason not to believe what my uncle was saying was real. And he was so serious about it. It was like you could cut the air with a knife. It was so intense. He was really upset. And then after that, he never talked about it again. I was just little, so that story really stuck with me, because I really respect my uncle. He taught me a lot, and he was a good man. And it's like, okay, so Uncle's saying these things on TV are real, okay?
Right.
Like, what do you do? Okay, I've been out in the woods. I've seen bull elk. I've seen bear. I've seen mountain lions. I've seen bobcat. I was kind of like raised in the forest, so I'm used to all the different animals here. And it's like, okay, I didn't want to believe him. Okay.
I can understand that. And he probably didn't want to believe it either.
I actually have a photograph of my uncle running the lumber mill. I don't know if you guys can see it, but that's my Uncle Hans.
Yeah.
Very tough man. He didn't make stuff up. He was like very serious. He was actually a cat skinner. And if anybody knows what a cat skinner is,
you might explain it before they call PETA.
Yeah, it's the Pacific Northwest is known for logging. And he was the guy that went up the mountainside on a actual V8 Caterpillar heavy equipment, and made the roads.
Right.
So when I was a kid, I would actually ride along with my uncle. He wasn't afraid of anything. I swear, nothing. He was like iron.
I believe you.
So for him to tell us that he was afraid of something, that really stuck in my head as a child.
Man, how would you like to be a young lady sitting around hearing your big burly uncle tell a story about him being scared in the woods?
I tell you, that has to make an impression on you like that. Then you fast forward 20 years, something like that happens to you. But it, with what happened to her, had to have been much more frightening, because she was not a Bigfooter. Just being there alone with 2 young boys, and being an hour and a half hike away from your vehicle in the middle of the night. It's this is something that you can get chill bumps listening to this story.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead, play this clip of what happened to Khym.
So about that time, some guy walks up the trail from upriver and starts walking towards me and the boys, and I'm like, hello. He's like, who are you and what are you guys doing down here? It was like so gruff. I was like almost scary. Okay. I'm like, well, we're just out hiking, okay? I've never been here before, and we just like came out here for the day. And he introduced himself, and he was actually really cool. His name was Mad Jack. And he said, well, hang on a minute. My wife's right behind me. You can meet her. And so I met these people down at the bottom of this trail and started talking to them. And it turned out that they actually owned the mining claims down there at that time. And so I spent some time. We actually got to be really good friends over a period of time. And they told me that they had another mining claim downriver that was available for lease. And I'm like, okay, let's check this out. So I found out that there were cabins down there and that had been mined for a long time, like since the 1800s. And it was really just a fun experience with my kids. And I'm like, okay, so let's lease this mining claim for the summer. Okay, so we can come down here and spend a week or two and just have fun and look for some gold, because that's something I hadn't done before. So it's like, okay, so I signed the contract with Jack and Lisa, and we leased the cabin for the summer, and came back a couple of weeks later. I don't know if they were down there at the time, but we just came in, and I was planning on spending an entire week down here. So you're like down in the bottom of a ravine, and it's like it gets very little sunlight once you get way down in there. There's maybe 2 hours of full sun in the middle of the day. And then it's in shadow, like morning and evening. Yeah. So it's kind of damp and dark, but it's beautiful. Like, it's just like, and so we're out there having fun, exploring, checking out the creek and stuff. And I had packed in enough food for a week. And that particular, I think it was the second night we were there. I remember we actually left the cabin for the day. We went way downriver. We just had fun swimming and playing, and we came back. It was fairly late in the evening, but it was like a long day, so it wasn't dark until late, right? So I remember it had a wood stove and kerosene lanterns, no power, of course. So I made the kids dinner, and it was after dark, and they were tired from playing, but they were still wide awake from being excited and staying in this really cool cabin. It was from the 1800s, and it was like a little 2-room cabin, but people had been in and out of there probably and brought different things in over the years. So people tried to refix the original cabin up. So people had painted it and did little things inside and brought in a bed and different things. So it was pretty cool. It was like stepping back in time. So the whole atmosphere was like really, really interesting. Even so, it kind of reminded me of what it was like when I was a kid before we had electricity, because Grandma had the kerosene lanterns and stuff. So it was like, this is neat. I was really happy about being down there. So I remember feeding the kids. And then I put the fire down for the night because it was like really late by the time I got done cooking and stuff, and got the kids into bed, and they fell out like a log. They just fell asleep quick. And then the next thing I know, as soon as I shut the kerosene lantern off and I was getting ready to crawl in bed, something started hitting the side of the cabin wall way up above my head, and just shaking the whole building just so hard. And I'm like in the dark. My kids are just fell asleep, and I'm like, what was that? I'm out here with 2 kids and a dog out in the middle of the national forest. My car is an hour and a half uphill through an old growth forest, right? And I'm like, so I always carry a firearm because we were raised with firearms. So I grabbed my gun first thing, didn't make a sound, and just kept pointing my gun at the direction of the sound. And it was almost like somebody was beating on the wall with 2 fists, but maybe open-handed, more of a slapping. But it was so hard it actually shook the walls and the floor. And I thought it was going to come through the wall. And just below where it was hitting is one of those old-fashioned windows with the little square panes, you know, the type I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old style windows, the little thin glass. And they were rattling in the wooden frames. Like, I thought it was going to come through this window or wall or whatever. So I stayed up until daylight. It actually came around the front of the cabin and went under the porch and started hitting the front door too. So here I am in the dark with the dog curled up behind my leg, pointing my gun at this door for what seemed like eternity. Okay. And I kept hearing it would walk around the building. And it was dark, so I really didn't see it, but like through the window I could kind of see a shadow. And it was like really huge, like taller than a man would be. So yeah. That's when it like really hit me hard that my uncle's story was true. Right there at that moment, it's like, oh, these things are real. Right. I mean, I got goosebumps right now, literally, thinking about it. I didn't know how to process that at the time. So I had a hard time with it for a little while. And it was scary. It was very scary. All I could think about is defend my children at any cost. Whatever this thing is, I don't know, but just protect my babies, right? So I remember staying up all night. I was so exhausted by morning. It never did come in or break into the building, but just it being out there, I didn't know where it was. I could hear twigs snapping, like something was walking past this other side of the building, and then it would go quiet for a while. And then I would hear some more like brush over here, and then it would be quiet. So it only hit the walls the 2 times, but it was like the first time it hit the wall like so hard. I really thought the wall was going to fall in. So. Yeah. And the front porch wasn't very tall. I mean, it might have been 8 feet tall where the door is. So it was like, I know that was short, but it hit the door so friggin' hard. I don't even see how a man could do that in the dark. Yeah. No, so I was sitting there thinking, okay, what is this? It's not a man. Somebody wouldn't come out here in the middle of the night to scare us. You know, what the heck is this thing? So, I remember first light, I packed my kids up and we hiked up the trail and left. I'm like, yeah. So yeah.
At first light, it quit beating on, it just left.
Yeah, daylight. And then when I was leaving, my dog kept, the hackles on the back of her neck would stand up as we were hiking out through the forest and uphill. As I felt like we were being watched and maybe stalked, like something had followed us back as we were leaving. And there was one spot in the trail where my dog actually stopped in the middle of the trail and she started growling. She didn't bark at this thing, and usually she barked at everything, but whatever this was, she did not bark at it. She just growled at it like she was so on guard. I've never seen her like that before. The whole time I had her, she was like, and she actually started to go over the side of this little side trail that we were passing by, but I couldn't see over the bank, and there was something over the edge of the trail there, but I never did see what it was. Yeah. And then, finally we got up to the car and we left.
Did y'all ever go back?
Actually, yes, I do. That's part of my main research area now. After that, it took me a while to get brave enough to actually go back down and try to find Jack and Lisa and talk to them. But I never did actually tell them what happened to us in the cabin that night. I made another excuse for not coming back to the mining claim. And I let them keep our money for the summer. I didn't even ask for a refund. But we became really good friends. I found out Jack and Lisa had spent about 18 years out there in the wilderness mining and prospecting various places between this other town and there. And then down south, we have the Rogue River, which is another big mining district. So they'd been up all the major rivers and all over the place out in the forest. So I was sitting in their cabin, their other cabin one day, talking to them. As I went back down in there probably a month later. And I asked Jack and Lisa, what do you guys think of Bigfoot? And Jack kind of looked at Lisa sideways, and she looked at him, and he didn't say anything for a minute. And he said, well, you know, we saw a track up on the Illinois River once. And then he didn't say much more. Then he looked at me and he said, hold on a minute. And he got up and he walked over to their bookcase. And there was a bunch of really old books there. And he pulled out this newspaper. And I'm looking at the paper, and it looked really old. It was all yellow and faded. And I'm thinking, well, what's this? And he hands it to me. And I lay it out on the table in front of me and start looking at it. And it said, South Fork 6's news. Thompson Flat cabin owner shoots at Bigfoot.
Wow.
Okay. And I'm like, wait a minute. This newspaper says it's from here. There's no town here. And he said, well, read some more. There was over 300 miners living down there at the time. It was a mining town. They actually had a butcher shop. They had a printing press. They had a blacksmith, and multiple cabins along the benches along that section of the river. So I'm like, wow, this is dated 1880 something. I'm like, where did you get this? It's probably the only known piece of paper from this place in history anywhere. And I'm like, that was so cool to be able to see that and hold it in my hand and actually read the story. So that's what really got me interested in this area more, in the history of the area. It's okay, so not only did this thing beat on my walls, they've been here for a long time.
Yeah.
So that was pretty neat.
I gotta tell you, any story that starts off with meeting somebody called Mad Jack on a trail, and then you continue on to a cabin way back in the woods, that just makes you think of every horror story you've ever seen. And then Khym's there with her kids and they're alone, and they have all this activity happening around the cabin, beating on the cabin door and everything else. And she's laying there on the floor with a pistol with her kids gathered around her, scared to death. I mean, that's what horror movies are made of right there.
Yeah. I can't imagine what was going through her mind. You can probably picture that while this was going on, she was thinking about that story that her uncle told her, what happened to her. And these monsters that are out in the woods, you don't know what's going to happen. It kind of makes me think of what happened to our friend Shane Carpenter when he was 10 years old and had an encounter with a Bigfoot. It's just hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine someone that doesn't even have Bigfoot on the radar, an adult.
Right.
And then, but just imagine being a child.
Right.
And having an encounter.
Yeah, as a child, your imagination, you make believe stuff of monsters all the time. And then whenever it's reality, I mean, that could scar you for life right there. No doubt.
Okay, we're going to play 2 encounter stories. The first one is Shane telling what happened to him when he was 10 years old. And then he had another encounter when being an adult with his wife and boys. This is what put him into wanting to go out and find this creature, to be able to try to understand, make sense out of anything that happened. I mean, it's hard to imagine what it's like to have some type of encounter like this. One thing that Khym talked about was it took a while for her to process what happened to her. And I have found that is a common denominator with eyewitnesses that has had an encounter with a Bigfoot. So let's go ahead and listen to Shane Carpenter talk about what happened to him.
So directly behind my uncle's house was a field, probably maybe a 5-acre field. Had a pond out in the center of it, and on the other side of that fence line was woods, or as far as I can remember. And so I crossed the field, went through the fence, and I went just maybe 15-20 yards into the wood line, and started yelling for Sam. And I wasn't hearing him bark back and reply or anything, so I started walking almost due east down inside this wood line. And I just remember getting to a certain point, and I just started getting this real uneasy feeling. And I knew that something was watching me. I didn't know what, I didn't know where, so I kept walking, and as I walked further east, it got stronger and stronger and stronger, and at one point I stopped, and for whatever reason I focused in on this tree. And within a few moments after focusing in on this tree, this thing stepped out from behind this tree and stood there and stared at me. And I mean, it felt like an eternity, but if I'm being honest, it was 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds max. We stood there and stared at each other from about 30 yards or 30 feet away, maybe. It was a really, really intense moment after the fact, but in the moment, I don't know if I was just in shock. I'd never heard of these creatures. I'd never seen anything about Bigfoot. I'd never heard the term Bigfoot at that point. I had no idea what I was looking at other than this bipedal creature that was covered in hair. Eventually, we just stared at each other. I was staring into its eyes. When I recount everything, I don't have details of the body so much because I was so focused on the eyes and the face of this creature. So we stared at each other for a few moments. It turned, walked up this hill, and as soon as it crested over the hill, that's when fear kind of took over, and I kind of came back, and I turned, took off running, jumped the fence. I didn't go through the barbed wire fence. I literally jumped the fence in a full run, and I got about halfway across the field, and I saw my dad's vehicle who was there to pick me up. So I started screaming and yelling for my dad. By the time I got to the fence behind the house, I was crying and freaking out. And my dad, of course, he heard me yelling, so he met me out on the back porch, and he was trying to console me, asking me what was wrong. And I told him what I had just seen and what had just happened. And he took me in to calm me down some more. And long story short, he tried to convince me that I was young and impressionable, and I was seeing shadows or something, and of course I knew what had happened was 100% real. I knew exactly what I'd seen. This thing was, for the most part, black. There was some brown in the facial hair. The nose was like ours, except a little wider, a little flatter. Real distinct brow ridge. Had a larger space between the nose and the upper lip. Its face was, for the most part, covered with hair. It was thinner around the eyes and around the nose, of course. When this thing looked at me, it almost seemed as though it was inquisitive. It wasn't giving me any kind of stern look, or any, it wasn't giving me a look that as a human I would consider being, I would consider a bad look. Like its eyebrows weren't scrunched. It just had a complete straight somber face, like emotionless almost is the best way to describe it. It just stood there and stared at me, and I stared at it. After that point, I hated going into the woods. I quit hunting. I didn't want to even go out to the pond and fish by myself. I didn't want to go out into the woods with my cousins. I did here and there, but I was always, watching my back and waiting for that feeling to hit me again that I'd experienced before this thing stepped out. And years later, I was only 10 and I wasn't a big kid. So when I was looking at this thing, I was seeing something that was large. It was huge in my mind. Now, looking back on it, I realized that this thing that I'd seen and encountered was most likely a juvenile. It was maybe 5 to 6 foot tall at the most. It wasn't real muscular and well built. It was, fairly slender. The shoulders weren't really wide. It had more of a neck than what, people describe on the adults and what I've seen on the adults at this point. But I at some point in my life, I couldn't tell you when, I just kind of stored that away in a safe in the back of my head, locked it up, and just did my best to forget about it. I did, up until 2013, I didn't really enjoy going into the woods anymore. I didn't like hiking. I'd been on some hikes here and there, but it was always, kind of in the back of my head. Fast forward to 2013, I just up and decided one day, without any thought of this, I told my family, hey, I'm going to find a place to go hike tomorrow morning. It was a Saturday morning. It was July 1st, actually. I said, let's go hiking tomorrow. And they all said, sure. So I got on Google Earth and started researching and looking, and I found a place that looked kind of cool. Had a creek running through it and stuff, so I thought we'll take the kids out to the creek and play and do some hiking. And it was a beautiful morning when we got out there, and we'd been out maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours into our hike. And this is me and my wife and my 3 sons. And we actually had an extra kid with us too. So there was 4 kids. I had a friend's child with us also, another young boy. And so we're walking this trail, and I start getting this weird vibe, this weird feeling. And immediately I'm like, oh no. I mean, it was the same exact feeling that I'd experienced when I was 10. And of course, all these emotions and stuff just flood me. And I told my wife, I'm getting the chills right now just talking about it. I told my wife, I said, stay right here and don't let the boys out of your sight. So I literally went in 20, 30 foot off the trail and started scanning. And there was, I scanned my eyes from left to right, and to my far right, down this gully, there was a large area that had a down tree, and it was all overgrown and vines grown into this down tree and stuff. And there were 4 black heads sticking up, looking at me. I snapped a couple pictures that ended up, blurry, of course. And, I went back out to the trail, and I told my wife, we need to turn around and head out of here right now. And she saw that something was wrong, but she also saw that I was trying not to let the kids I was trying to act as though everything was okay, normal, you know. I told the kids, hey, let's go. We're turning back. We're going to go back to the creek. And so we all turned around. We hiked out. We stopped at the creek, actually, and took some pictures. You know, I was trying to act completely normal. Yeah. And in one of these pictures, these two juveniles are in the background, actually. And which turned out to be a good thing, because I had to explain to my wife when we got home what had just happened. Not only did I have to explain to her what had just happened and that I had just seen these things, but I had to tell her about what had happened when I was 10. And this is something I'd never discussed with her. And of that whole situation, that was probably the hardest part, was hoping that my wife, you know, who trusted me and loved me with everything, believed what I was fixing to tell her. It was tough, man. I was really worried that my wife was going to look at me and think I was crazy, you know. And this is a common problem, obviously, you know, within this research and with people who have had encounters or not, and just, you know, look at the evidence and tend to believe that they are out there. And so I explained to my wife what had happened, and then I told her about what happened when I was 10, and that I was positive that what I'd just seen was 4 more of these things that I had encountered when I was 10. Same thing. And luckily she believed me. You know, we looked through the pictures that I snapped, and of course the one with the 4 heads popped up behind the brush. It was fuzzy, but you can see that there's 4 heads there. There's not a lot of detail, but there's 4 coned heads sticking up behind this brush pile. And then we start looking through the pictures later on that evening, and I blew up this picture of my kids at the creek sitting on this tree that had fallen down across the creek, and in the background there's these 2 things. One is they're sticking their heads out on each side of this tree just off the trail where we had came from. Blew my mind. Totally blew my mind.
Those were a couple of incredible encounters there. As a 10-year-old, the last thing I want to see going through the woods is a Bigfoot. But worse than that, taking my family and kids out on a hike and knowing there are some of these things around watching and there ain't nothing you can do about it, that would bother me a whole lot worse than me being there by myself.
That's very true. And I think for those of us that know Shane, knows his zeal, I cannot tell you the phone calls that I have received from Shane, and you can just hear the excitement in his voice whenever he goes telling you what happened the last time he went out. And it's Shane, for me, is someone that I consider a mentor, someone that's able to put their fear in a box and put it somewhere, and to keep focused on what his goals are, to be able to go out and accomplish those goals. If you haven't watched the 400, you can watch it on Amazon Prime. The link is in the description. If you're looking for a blueprint of what a researcher should be doing when they go out in the field, as far as I'm concerned, this is the blueprint that you need to be watching.
Yeah, they incorporate many techniques. They incorporate routine hike. They incorporate tracking. They incorporate gifting. There's a whole facet of things that they do to bring success to what they do. They're just not one dimension of research. They do many things, and they hone in on what works the best, and they're always tweaking what they do, but they've come up with a pretty good system that they get good interaction, good evidence, and you can see some of that on the 400.
If you look at the team he's put together, with Randy and Dan. He's got a great team. I can't wait for the next one to come out, because every time he goes out, he is discovering more and more. Y'all need to check out Entering the 400. It's a great documentary.
Into the 400.
Into the 400.
Butcher.
Thank you for that correction, Larry.
No problem. I didn't want them searching the wrong thing.
This has been a great podcast, hasn't it?
It is, but it's time for our medicine, our New Year's Eve medicine.
Well, at our age, that's pretty much a pillow.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And both of us probably need to go on a diet tomorrow. We've both been eating way too much. See my jaws? I got 3 of them, plus 4 chins.
You just called me fat. I
Yeah.
heard you.
Yeah.
But we've got some exciting things that's coming up. Larry and I went out last weekend to a new area, and this area is called Firefly Landing, and it used to be closed off, and there's been a lot of activity that has happened there. I remember Khym taking us out there,
Yeah.
and telling and actually showing us where things happened, what happened. And you used to not be able to get in this area. And we were so surprised that once it was, as our friend Bama Murdoch would say, legally could drive in there and camp, to be able to see how vast this area is. Larry has captured eye shine with the thermal. We've had all kind of callbacks coming on, so we're ready to spend some time at Firefly Landing and get killed.
That's right. Mudded. And we're going to talk about it Monday on Beast of the Woods. Mark's going to start a new show on my channel.
Well, I tell you what, Larry, why don't you do a plug about Beast of the Woods?
I just did. I said Mark's going to do a new show on my channel on Beast of the Woods. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, because if you haven't watched Larry's channel, it's a great channel. You're going to see fishing and hiking and camping and vocals. If you will stay tuned to the end of this show, I've got links right on there. You just have to click there.
Beast of the Woods is definitely an amateur fishing, amateur hunting, amateur Bigfooting, amateur YouTuber. And I'm proud to be amateur.
Me and you both. But it's a great channel, and I'm not sure if Larry knows which way he's going to go with the theme and this and that, but it's just going to be us just sitting around talking. So I'm whatever Larry tells me to do, I'm going to do it.
Uh-oh. He's in trouble. All right, guys. Y'all have a happy new year. Thanks for joining us. And Mark has plenty more words to tell you.
Well, we appreciate each and every one. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, it doesn't cost any money. We would be honored if you would sub to our little channel. We got these Beast TV t-shirts. And so if you want to help out our channel in that way, there's a link in the comment section to take you there to Larry's Gear Shop. And yeah, Larry's Gear Shop. Go look at Larry's junk. And but y'all be safe, and we hope that everyone has a blessed 2021 year coming up. We wish the absolute best for each and every one of you out there.
You almost got choked up on that each and every one. Most everyone.
I mean everyone.
Even the fat ones?
Even the fat ones. We're fat, Larry.
I know. I like it.
Kind of reminds me of last week when Kerry Arnold busted us out.
Yes, he did. That's our friend. They ain't ever looked that skinny.
I'm going to have to talk to Linda about that.
Yeah. Oh, me.
But we thank everyone for tuning in. Night, night, footers.
Night, night.
Beast TV would like to welcome all of our new Facebook members. Be sure to check out our pictures and videos of possible evidence. And if you haven't checked out the Files tab, there is a wealth of information that you may find beneficial. If you would like to support Beast TV, check out our gear. We have coffee mugs, face masks, gaiters, shirts, and tank tops. The link is pinned at the top of the comment section. Everything is always marked down 20%, so come check out our junk. We want to thank all of our new subscribers and our faithful followers. Also, be sure to check out our field evidence videos and our sister channel, Beast of the Woods. That's Larry's channel. If you want to help us out, make sure that you are subscribed. Click the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again to each of you for watching, and we will see you again. Same bat time, same bat channel. Night, night, footers.
This has been a Sawdust production.